The Virginia legislature has just sine die. That means it's the end of the General Assembly. However, will there be a special session? What bills will actually be passed? Also, we have a new U.S. Congresswoman representing the 4th Congressional District. And what are the issues or the challenges for black voters in 2023? It's Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Claville. We'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back. It's Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We're so happy that you're joining us on this beautiful Sunday here in Hampton Roads. As always, we're broadcasting from the campus of the Norfolk State University, the largest and best HBCU in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I dare say the entire country. And we're also in the studio at WNSB 91.1, the soul of VA. Right here on this historic campus. As always, we've got our producer here keeping us right on the mic, as always, Marvin Folks, also known as DJ Scandalous, which you can hear on the air every day from Monday through Friday from 2 to 6 p.m. He's also broadcasting games and in the studio on Saturday. And yes, I call him the hardest working man in radio because he's in the studio with me here on Sunday. Not only that, but last but not least, I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for supporting us for everything that we do. Listen, I say it all the time. There's no way we can do what we do unless we have the support of you, the listeners, for everything that you give to us. This show is for you. When I first started this show on behalf of the Center for African American Public Policy here at Norfolk State University, it was all about bringing movers and shakers and policymakers to you, the community, to discuss issues that are important to you. For the most part, I believe that policy should be created from the ground up. And in order to do that, we need to hear from you, the people. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is if you continue to voice your concerns, and everything that you want to hear from your elected officials, we want to make sure that you can have a voice to do that. And that's what this show is for. As a matter of fact, when we talk about voicing our opinions from the ground up, I attended just last week, Friday, a phenomenal event hosted by Gethsemane Baptist Church. That is Bishop Riddick, who is an alum of the Norfolk State University in Newport News, where he hosted U.S. Senator Tim Kaine and my good friend Congressman Bobby Scott on the listening tour to hear from black men in the community, a roundtable. And it was a phenomenal event where black men in the community from all walks of life, single fathers, individuals who served in the military, individuals who are law enforcement, pastors, business owners, elected officials, academicians, the whole nine were there and talked about issues impacting their community. Because even though we're all African American, even though we're all male, even though we're all here in Hampton Roads, we all operate in different communities. But the commonality that we have is we come together as one for a collective good. And that's how the community is supposed to interact. That's the beauty of community politics. That's community. That's the beauty of community as a whole. I see Marvin here shaking his head, and he says, look, you're exactly right. That's how democracy works. When people from different walks of life simply come together to ensure that their interest in their community is heard, that's democracy. So enough of that. What I want to do, I'm glad I was able to just kind of give you a little synopsis about what this last week was about, because now it kind of delves into the end of our legislative session. That's right. Listen, for an entire month of January and February, I've had legislators on the show to talk about issues that they're dealing with in the community for you. bills that are up for passage, bills that they're fighting so to make sure that they don't pass, to protect your rights. We were fortunate enough to have our alum and chairman of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, Delegate Lamont Bagme, which gave the charge, hey, out there, what are you doing? Out there, we're working for you. Out there in the community, we want your voice to be heard. So call us. Let us know what it is that you want us to represent you for. And we've had others who were on the show that basically gave the same voice, the same energy. Delegate Jackie Glass, who represents the district in which Norfolk State University sits in, fighting for the rights of those who can't fight for themselves. Common sense bills, common sense legislation. That's what it's all about. And we're fortunate enough to have a cadre of delegation there in the General Assembly, both in the House and also in the Senate, that represent your interests, the interests of the people. Now, I've said before, policy should work from the bottom up, but usually it operates from the top down. But this show and other entities that we have, town halls that we have here at the university and that are hosted across the Commonwealth as well, gives you an opportunity to voice your concerns. So keep in mind, this is your democracy. This is your opportunity. This is your chance to make sure that your voice is heard. So when we talk about also the legislature and the legislative process, sine die. So as you know, the legislature here in the Commonwealth of Virginia starts second Wednesday of the month. And from there, you have two sessions, a short session of 45 days and a long session of 60 days on the even years, which are what we call the budget years. And then after that, sometimes the governor calls a special session. Sometimes there's a reconvene session and the like. Well, sine die happened on Friday. That means legislators are going back home to their districts, waiting for the call to come back to Richmond in order to work through bills that should and can become law if they can agree. So right now it's not over. Still, we're waiting for a budget to be signed by the governor and these things to be hashed out. Now, listen, nobody said that politics was an easy thing. But I'm telling you, it's something that the process works. The process is good. The process itself is one that makes us very unique as a country, very unique as citizens of the world. People come to the United States all the time. Why? Because it's a place of great opportunity, the greatest opportunity in the world right now. And the Commonwealth of Virginia itself is also a great place with a wealth of history, but also a wealth of opportunities. We're sitting right here in history. I'm sitting on the campus of history. I'm sitting in the city of history. I'm sitting in the region of history, Hampton Roads, the great Hampton Roads region. And I'm telling you, by being here, you realize that anything and all things are possible if you can only apply yourself and push and make sure that your voice is heard. So, like I said, it's not over. We're interested to see what comes about. Right now, there are bills that are going to what's called conference. That means you have a smaller group of Democrats and Republicans on both sides in the House and the Senate that are coming together to flesh out and hash out language for final bill passages. So we're looking forward to seeing that. We're looking forward to finding out what those bills are so that we can report back to you, the people, to let you know what bills have been created specifically to help govern your lives. So we're looking forward to having other guests on in order to break that down for us and let us know exactly what we have, what is in store for you as the legislature comes to an end for this 2023. But we're going to move full speed ahead, especially next month and the month after that, as we get ready to look at and forecast the re-election of General Assembly members, General Assembly members here in the Commonwealth. Every single office here in the Commonwealth, in the General Assembly, all 100 delegates, all 40 state senators, is up for re-election. That's right. up for re-election. And that's something that I'm telling you, it's exciting because, especially for political junkies like myself, but for the entire Commonwealth, because now you have an opportunity to really have a voice in not only what policies are pushed, but what the people that you want to represent you. This is actually your time to ensure that your voice is truly, truly heard. So when we talk about your voice being heard, when we talk about your representation, there's none better than what I see that happened in Richmond in the 4th Congressional District. And again, that district also comes here in the Hampton Roads area as well. It was represented by the former great Don McEachin, congressman, who unfortunately passed away due to the complications of prostate cancer. Congressman McEachin, I tell you, we attended a session with the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus in D.C. And that delegation is something that's hosted every Congressional Black Caucus week, CBCF. And it's a great time of legislators, African-American legislators, to come together to really look at policies and discuss, have think tanks and discuss solutions for issues. And I attended a reception with he and Bobby Scott, and that was the last time I got a chance to speak to him, shake his hand, and wish him well. He was moving a little slow at that time as well. But, it was a life well lived. It was a life of service, public service to the people, and phenomenal. There's not one bad thing anyone can say that he didn't represent his district with passion and conviction, And again, his legacy continues to live on. So a special election was held to fill that seat. And Virginia elected last week the first black female in Congress, former state senator Jennifer McClellan. She won the seat to fill the 4th Congressional District, formerly held by Representative Don McEachin. Now, Senator McClellan, she currently a state senator out of Richmond. And by the way, I want to correct something very quickly. Congressman McEachin did not die of prostate cancer, but complications of colorectal cancer. So I want to make sure I make that correction. But Jennifer McClellan, she defeated Leon Benjamin, a Republican Navy veteran and local pastor. Benjamin lost to Congressman McEachin as well by nearly 30 points in November. Now, according to the New York Times, Senator McClellan, she centered her campaign on legislation she spearheaded as a state senator, issues she championed like voting rights, environmental protection, and abortion access often dovetail with what the New York Times says the National Democratic Platform. But she says she passed legislation to protect our right to vote, our right to a clean environment. She led the fight for reproductive freedom, and she also says that she'll take the same fight to Congress. So what has happened is that the people of that district said, hey, we trust you to represent us in Congress. An opinion essay in Essence magazine has said that Ms. McClellan, she said that her identity as a black female lawmaker would help shape her policy positions. Quote, this election isn't just about my lived experiences. It's about elevating the experiences of so many whose voices have not been heard in our government. So again, hats off to Senator McClellan, now Congresswoman-elect Jennifer McClellan, who we've had on the show, who I know very well and have had the opportunity to serve on a panel with her. So I look forward to working with her as she takes her ascension to the People's House. So congratulations to her and all those that were supporting that campaign. This is Say the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. And as we look at the legislative session ending in the Commonwealth of Virginia, sine die, we look forward and look ahead at what bills will be passed after the conference and what bills will be signed. But also we look forward to what's happening, what's coming up in the next session of Congress. So the Congressional Congress is, they've started their next session this week coming up. And with that, there's an article that I thought was very interesting and that appeared in The Hill, thehill.com. Of course, The Hill is a publication for federal legislation and talk and all the whole nine. It's the most informative publication for Capitol Hill. And it's entitled, this was published in January 2023, but it's entitled 5 Challenges Black Voters Want Tackled in 2023. Now, this is based upon, of course, polls. Of course, you have, they quote the NAACP polls, Pew Research polls, and others. But I thought it was very interesting because the same issues that it seems that we were dealing with almost 25, 50 years ago are the same issues that black voters want dealt with now. So what are they? Well, first is white supremacy and racism. Secondly, we're looking at voting rights. Also, police reform. And then student debt relief. And then lastly, mobilization for 2024. I want to deal with these a little bit out of order here. I want to first deal with student debt. And it seems as if that every time we're looking to expand protections for borrowers who are not companies or banks, there's a pushback on it. But keep in mind that current President Joe Biden campaigned on relieving or forgiving $10,000, $20,000 of student loan debt when he got in office. Well, this particular effort has stalled in the court. It was finally conceived and created by the Biden administration through the Department of Education. In addition to that, this particular effort was then stalled by a lawsuit filed by Republicans. Now, of course, student loan debt across the board affects everyone, not just African Americans. You have more white Americans in college than all other races combined. And, of course, they're the largest group that, of course, borrows money because they're the largest population. So, it's baffling, again, that anyone would want to stop this because it benefits everyone. And by forgiving $20,000 of student loan debt, it wipes out the debt of over 60%, the entire student loan debt of over 60% of Americans. Think about that. Are you one of those? Are you one of those individuals that would like this campaign promise to come true? Well, Wisdom Cole, who is part of the NAACP, who I had the opportunity to be with in D.C. last year when Dr. J and myself traveled there for a panel discussion with Pharrell Williams' program there in D.C., Something in the Water, which will be back here in Virginia Beach in April. He stated that President Biden's student loan debt is a racial and economic justice issue that stains the soul of America, says Wisdom Cole, the youth and college director of the NAACP. Also, the NAACP and Congressional Black Caucus said 20,000 forgiveness enacted by Biden was a step in the right direction, though many are still advocating for 50,000 or even full student loan forgiveness. I'm raising my hand for full. So let's see what happens. But it won't happen unless we continue to push forward and ensure that our elected officials hear our voice. When we talk about community reform, community interaction, there's no better topic that encompasses all of that than police reform or police and community reform. You know, more than 2 years after the killing, according to The Hill, more than 2 years after the killing of George Floyd, which led to nationwide calls for reform, there's been little progress on enacting federal police reform. As a matter of fact, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed the House twice, but legislation stalled in the Senate, even though at least half of Americans believe major changes are needed, according to a Gallup Center on Black Voices. As a matter of fact, Democrats in Congress have agreed that GOP legislation did not go far enough, while Republicans say Democrats went way too far. But nevertheless, this particular piece of legislation was stalled in the Senate. where Senator Cory Booker and, of course, Senator Tim Scott on the Republican side were supposed to work together to find a solution. According to the Hill, it says the George Floyd Policing Act would limit qualified immunity, prevent racial profiling by law enforcement, and limit the use of no-knock warrants, chokeholds, and corded holes. So, once again, we all saw the murder of George Floyd. We all saw the killing that took place because of no-knock warrants. Let me read this statement by Derek Johnson, NAACP. He says, in a year unlike any other, the American people spoke up, marched, and demanded reforms of policing, law enforcement, unions, and partisan politics chose to stand on the wrong side of history. That's Derek Johnson, president, NAACP president, and CEO. He said they've chosen to stand with those who have lynched the very people they are meant to protect and serve. And that's also, according to the Gallup Center on Black Voices, 72% of Black Americans believe major changes to police reforms are needed. So again, we saw the marches. We saw the unfortunate murders and killings of African Americans in the hands of police. I think enough. We don't have to say any more on that. Again, where does that go? Again, these are 5 major issues, according to polls, that Black Americans want to see would change. But I think it applies to all Americans. What do you think? Is student loan debt relief a major issue for you? What about the George Floyd policing bill, or even enacting the President Obama era, 21st century community and police reform? Something. What can be done? Also, when we talk about white supremacy and racism, keep in mind Emmett Till. We all remember Emmett Till, unfortunately, a young boy. He was a boy. He was a boy. He wasn't even 15 years old. From Chicago, went to Mississippi to be with his relatives for the summer. White men broke into the home, grabbed him out of bed, beat him up, killed him, and put something around his neck, dropped him into the river. He drowned to death and died. His mother had the courage to open up the casket so a photo can be taken of her son, and it basically captured the conscience of the world. Well, believe it or not, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act was introduced by Representative Bobby Rush, Democrat out of Illinois, which signed it into law President Biden signed it into law in March of last year. Now, I want to make sure he made lynching a federal hate crime. Now, think about that. Lynching was just made a federal hate crime. So when we talk about protections of white supremacy, Black Americans, according to polls, want to see that these type of acts are declared domestic terrorism. And it is a national security issue or threat. The murder that took place, the mass killing that took place in Mother Emanuel Church AME in South Carolina, is not considered a domestic terrorist act. The murders that took place in a grocery store in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the killer targeted Black people, traveled from another state there, is not considered a domestic terrorist act. As fears continue to grow, according to the Hill, over guns and the impact of, as we look at upper mobility, African-American upper mobility and protections from those that don't want it or don't like it, this becomes more of an issue for the country. Not just African Americans, specific African Americans, but for the country when we talk about issues of security and domestic terrorism. As a matter of fact, in October, an NAACP survey found that 44% of respondents believe racism and discrimination to be the most important issue facing Black community today. And the repercussions led to fewer job opportunities, economic insecurity, health care inequities, and voter suppression, the survey found. When we move to the fourth issue, and again, I'm taking it out of a different order based upon what I feel is the most important issue that we should deal with: voting rights. The Freedom to Vote Act there are 2 bills in Congress now that are stalled in the Senate that would help to protect voting rights. It's the Freedom to Vote Act would expand mail-in voting, early voting, automatic voter registration, and the like. Also, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act will restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in response to a Supreme Court decision. I believe there's no bigger issue facing the protections of African Americans and democracy in our country than our voting rights. We saw during the time of the Trump administration, and we saw during the time of the Supreme Court peeling back the protections of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, we saw the dangers of not protecting our right to vote. When the majority feels, or the other side feels, that they can't win an election fair and square, then they change the rules to give themselves an advantage. Now, the rules are out there to be changed if they're not challenged. So that's why we have to make sure that we challenge it at every turn. The right to vote, according to former Congressman John Lewis, the great John Lewis, is the most powerful nonviolent weapon we have in our democracy, and it needs our protection. And we need it to protect us. Finally, mobilization for 2024. It is my opinion, this is me, this is going to be the most important election in our time period at this juncture in America. Why do I say that? Right now, the country is at a fork. We're at a time where cultural politics, misinformation, and pure hatred is spewing out of every area of communication, every corner of our country. The next leader of our country, the next Congress that we choose to represent us, they're going to set the precedent of where our country should go because they're our voice. But you can make your voice heard by sending the right people into office to represent not just you, but this great country that we call the United States of America. In order to be united in one voice, we don't all have to agree on everything, but we have to agree that this country is worth saving, and this country is worth every bit of our efforts to maintain the freedoms that we so wonderfully enjoy. Many people served, many people died in order that all people can have this right. Well, I'm pretty sure you can hear my passion when it comes to our democracy. There's no other passion outside in politics that trumps that for me. So I'm excited again for this upcoming year. I'm excited for this legislative session that just ended and the outcomes of it. Again, congratulations to Congresswoman-elect Jennifer McClellan. Also, for the next upcoming Congress that starts this week, good luck to all of our representatives. Make sure you make your voice heard. Call their offices. Let them know what you want to see here passed, issues you want to hear addressed, so that they could be your voice on Capitol Hill. Well, you know what? It's about that time. I'm starting to hear the music, and so are you. And that means that our time is done. And it seems like every time we're having fun, we got to come back next week. Well, once again, we want to thank you for joining us here for State of Water, where I bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. Join us every Sunday at 10 a.m. as we continue to bring those voices to you. As always, be great, God bless, and we'll see you next week.